Good morning. We would like to go ahead and get started. Good morning. So good morning. My name is Doreen Riley, and I'm the Vice President of University Advancement at John Carroll. Thank you for coming today. We'd like to get started. So we are really honored to be able to do this for Pete Bernardo. And we are really grateful that you all are here today. The fact that we can do this in person and we don't have to do this on Zoom, we are thrilled as a team, and we are happy to see all of you. So I'm Doreen Riley. I'm the Vice President for University Advancement, and I had the pleasure of working with Pete for 14 years. And he taught me a lot. He taught me a lot about Carroll, and he was a true team player with our University Advancement Division and on campus. So we are thrilled to honor him today. So Pete's affiliation with the university started decades and decades ago, almost 7 decades. So he started as a student, started here as a freshman studying chemistry, and he went on to earn multiple other degrees at John Carroll, both in physics and chemistry and religious studies. He was truly a student of Carroll, and he loved everything about John Carroll. And many of you know the many activities that he did while he was pursuing his degree. And then after his first degree, how he approached his military service, his commitment to others, his service to his country, and his service to his family, and his service to John Carroll. So we are delighted to honor him today. This was one of his favorite events. The reunion that we know today, or the format that we do, Pete made it up. So for those of you that come to reunion and the feel of it, and he won many, many awards for the way that we did reunion in the early years, and it became the model for the other Jesuit institutions. So he never talked about that. Joanne, I don't know if you know that, but it was all Pete, right? So typical Pete. So Pete, after Pete returned and got his degree, and he taught military science for a while, and he taught many, many alumni in military science. And then one of my predecessors, Paul Kantz, recruited him to the alumni office, and he embraced that job with gusto. And he hosted many things for you, many things for our alums, parties, memorial services. He raised millions of dollars for John Carroll, endowed professorships, for facilities, for scholarships. He was always willing to travel wherever he needed to go and to do whatever he needed to do. And even though it may not have been in his job description, he would show up early reunion morning and be schlepping the dollies around in the cart to try to set up. So we appreciate so much him being a colleague and a mentor to many on this campus. To begin the program, I would like to invite one of his colleagues, one of his classmates, one of our star scholars, Dr. George Verlajor, who is an emeritus professor of history and who has led several alumni tours for us to Gettysburg, which generally sell out. So hopefully we can bring that back again. But I would like you to say a few words about your friend, Pete.
Thank you very much. Really humbled to be up here today to talk about someone that I care very deeply for, Pete Bernardo. I think everybody that's seated here today and countless others were touched by this brilliance of this man at many different levels. I first met Pete when I was a freshman here, and he was a senior. He was commissioned a lieutenant in the Transportation Corps. He was a distinguished military graduate and a cadet colonel. In them our days, we were all commissioned in the Transportation Corps. Okay, but the distinguished military graduates had the option of staying in one of the combat arms and then transferring into the Transportation Corps. So Pete was in the infantry, and he went to Fort Benning, Georgia. He was number 1 in his infantry basic officers course, then went to Ranger School, and then was assigned to the 1st Battalion, 27th Infantry Regiment, Wolfhounds in Vietnam, the 25th Division. In Vietnam, he was involved in some of the heaviest fighting of the war at a place called Cu Chi, the Iron Triangle, Operation Junction City, among others. And one of the things he did was his outfit protected Rome plows. These were huge plows about the size of his tent that were used after the Air Force defoliated the areas. Okay? And one thing about Cu-Chi was the fact that the base of the 25th Division was a base camp, but they built it on top of one of the largest tunnel complexes that the Viet Cong had. He told the story that every once in a while, the Viet Cong would pop out of nowhere. They were trying to, until they figured out that they were coming out of tunnels underneath the camp. Okay, so that's what they did. They had to ferret them out, so to speak. Okay, and destroy these tunnel complexes, and that's one of the things that Pete did. The area was defoliated. B-52 strikes, arc lights came in and leveled everything. Okay, and that's what Pete did. And then in the process of that, during an action against a bunker complex, he was leading his platoon in the attack, and he turned, and most of his platoon, not everybody else pretty much, was pinned down, killed or wounded. And Pete made the attack by himself. Knocked out several Viet Cong bunkers, rescued one of his soldiers that had been wounded, carried the young man on his back through enemy fire to the American lines. And for that, he was nominated for the Congressional Medal of Honor. Did not receive the Medal of Honor. The award was degraded to the Distinguished Service Cross. He also received several Purple Hearts while he was in Vietnam. So after a year tour, he returned to Cleveland and was asked by a fraternity brother of his and fellow lieutenant, Frank Tricomi, who had also served with the 25th Division in Vietnam, if Pete would be willing to be in Frank Tricomi's wedding party. Okay? And as it turns out, I was in that wedding party too. And indirectly, I'm responsible for Joanne and Pete getting married. Indirectly. So after that, they got married, and Pete stayed in the service, obviously. And after attending a number of schools, including Transportation 4 Basic, Transportation 4 Advanced course, he was assigned to the 150th Transportation Company, Light Medium Trans Company, which he commanded in Germany, part of the 37th Trans Group. Then returning from a tour in Germany, he was assigned to Redstone Arsenal in Alabama. And he was a liaison between the civilian components of the Army missile program and the Army. And that's what he did. And then he also was assigned somewhere along the line as an instructor here to John Carroll, which is when he received his first master's degree in sciences. Afterwards, I believe he went back to Alabama or other schools. And then he was offered another tour in Europe or the professor of military science position here at John Carroll. And I believe by that time, he and Joanna decided that it was time to leave the service. So when he was here, he was professor of military science, very innovative instructor, etc. And then he was offered the position of alumni director, which he accepted. Here we are. I can say from in my personal experiences, military history classes that I teach each semester, Pete would come in and talk to the class on his experiences not in the Army and also in Vietnam. It was extremely engaging for the students to hear firsthand accounts of the things that they were reading about or I was telling them about. And we also had some very robust discussions in the class about certain things, okay, that occurred. So it was always a pleasure to have Pete come in. No loss for words, and I'm usually not. Good things to say about him because there are so many things to say. He was a good colleague. He was a good friend. I used to see him a couple times. I go probably once a week and I'd sit down with him for a while. He was a great listener. He was always willing to share solutions to problems that we might have. Always willing and able to discuss events on campus and life and philosophical things in general. you could always count on Pete Bernardo. Always count on Pete Bernardo. Okay? Somebody once asked me, would you serve under Pete Bernardo? Without hesitation, I said, absolutely. Because I knew he was going to get as many of us back as he could. He was good. Good at what he did. Every aspect of what he did. He was fearless. Okay? And he loved his family. He loved his church. He loved this place. So with that, I can only say that may your memory be eternal. God bless you. And we'll see you around. Thank you.
Thank you, George. So one of the things I forgot to do at the beginning, because I was trying to quiet you, was to introduce Pete's family who's here. So many of you know them, but in case you're not, Joanne is here. So welcome, Joanne. And welcome Peter and Matthew, Pete's sons, and welcome Pete's sister, Lois. So thank you. And Raymond Billy, Pete's cousin, who looks just like Pete. We're very similar to Pete. So you're definitely, you can tell. So next I would like to invite one of Pete's scholarly teachers, Dr. Ed Hannenberg, who would like to come up and speak about Pete the student and Pete the man. So thank you, Dr. Hannenberg. Dr. Hannenberg, if you don't know who he is the Jack and Mary Jane Breen Endowed Chair of Catholic Systematic Theology, and a favorite lecturer on campus, both to the students and alums. You already did a lecture this morning, so thank you for doing that for us. And welcome, Dr. Hannenberg.
Thank you very much, Maureen, and all of you for being here. When I saw that the alumni office was putting this together, how could you not be here to recognize Pete? And I'm like George, a bit at a loss for words. I mean, other than to say that Pete Bernardo was my hero. And I say that not as an American. He certainly was an American hero. I say that not as a blue streak. He was certainly a Carroll hero. But I say that as a theology teacher, that he was my hero. If I could fill my classes with Pete Bernardos, right, I would be in heaven. He was an incredible student. Many of you know that several years ago, Pete started a master's program in theology and religious studies here at John Carroll. And he did it because he wanted to do a better job teaching the kids the faith in his parish. And he felt like he needed to go back to school. Dorian mentioned earlier this morning, I gave a talk to another group of alumni about St. Ignatius of Loyola. You know, this year we're marking 500 years since that battle in which Ignatius, got his own version of the Purple Heart when he was wounded by a cannonball and forced to recuperate at home. And in the process of that experience had this conversion and decided that he was no longer going to go on to the life he had, but live a life really dedicated to the Lord and serving other people. And early on in that process, Ignatius realized he needed to go back to school to do what he was doing better. And that started with like sitting with the kids so he could learn his Latin. And I think sometimes with Pete, sitting in class with, our graduate program includes school teachers and parish ministers, but also some of our undergraduate majors who are kind of more advanced. And he was a blessing in that class, the way he, just his enthusiasm, his curiosity. It's usually the case that students of mine, when they get intimidated by a 5 or a 10-page paper, they'll, increase the font size and expand the margins. And he was always shrinking the font size and shrinking the margins. And he had so much to say, and he did it so well, and he took it so seriously. So he really was an ideal student. And I think that with his questions, with his almost childlike curiosity, and his laugh, which was almost a giggle, And I have to say, I cannot wait to hear that laugh when I, God willing, pass through those pearly gates, because it gave me so much joy, because it came from a place of such goodness. So he successfully completed his third degree from John Carroll and graduated last year in 2020. So although I have no authority whatsoever to do this, I would like to offer to Joanne, in deep appreciation for sharing Pete with us, because I know teaching those evening classes took time away. But he was doing something that he loved, and the fact that he supported him, that just, I know, meant the world to him. So I have a copy of his degree, and I pass it on to you as a remembrance of a great John Carroll student who receives this degree, Master of Arts in Theology and Religious Studies, magna cum laude.
So Dr. Hannenberg, we are in luck. We have the 26th president of John Carroll University here with us today, Dr. Al Mikiak, and I think he can certify the diploma. So I think it's official. So if you have not met Dr. Mikiak, please take an opportunity before you leave to introduce yourself. We are lucky to have him. He's been the Dean of the Bowler College of Business for 6 years, and he took the helm on June 1st of John Carroll, and he's doing a great job so far, and we look forward to helping him do many, many good things at John Carroll. So, but he can certify the diploma for sure.
Thank you very much, Doreen. What I heard from George was, he was a believer. He believed in this country. George spoke of his service to the military and to America. And I think what Ed was talking about is belief in the faith. He's so committed to his faith and sharing with others. And I only know Pete for the last 6 years, and so probably the least of anyone here. But Pete was a believer also in the institution. Right? He was a big believer in John Carroll, and he believed in the people here. And in my work with him, he believed in me, and we did a lot of great work together. And so I'm always grateful for him sharing. So he was a believer in the institution, and he shared that with everybody on the street. So thank you very much.
As we finish our tributes to Pete, I want to share a special initiative at John Carroll that was very, very close to Pete's heart. It's a program called the V3 Veterans Initiative, and I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but Pete created this a few years ago as a way to lighten the financial burden of the veterans who are studying at John Carroll who want to pursue a degree. And the V3 initiative, Pete came up with the name. It was basically veterans helping veterans helping veterans, so V3. And what the program does is it allows the university to give a stipend to a veteran while they are pursuing their degree, so that they don't have to have a second job or work another job, so that they can turn around and help other veterans, be a mentor for them to get through Carroll for whatever degree they're pursuing. So in just a couple of years, there's been $51,000 given to the program, which is enough to actually endow it. And we're hoping to continue to raise money for the V3 program. But what we are happy to announce today is that we are naming the program after Pete. It was his idea, and I think it's the right thing to do. The official name is the Lieutenant Colonel Pete Bernardo, class of 67, class of 82 grad, class of 17 grad, V3 Veterans Fund. So of course, Pete would be chirping in my ear right now if I did not invite you all to make a gift. If you would like to the V3 program, you can see any of us as you leave, or you can call us later when you have a brilliant idea or you win the lottery. So now I would like to invite Reverend Bernie McAniff from the Society of Jesus to do our final reflection for Pete and to also offer grace before we begin our meal. Father Bernie.
Yesterday, I gave a homily on, of all things, the Feast of the Sacred Heart at a church on Superior named Immaculate Conception. It was sort of a tough occasion, rhetorical occasion. So I thought, how am I going to bring the Sacred Heart into this? But I did, because the family happened to be a family in great need of reconciliation. But the Sacred Heart is one of our top devotions. And how do you talk about it in a new way? And I think this week I came across the fact that the kingdom of God is not a driverless car. The kingdom of God starts with Jesus and invites all of us to be pilots of the kingdom of God. And there's nothing greater than Jesus, the Sacred Heart, being a magna anima, who helps us, who maybe are lesser anima or animae at times. So in terms of how that affected how I view Pete, after I preached at his funeral, I was astonished to find out that I'd sort of undercoded or undertreated his great day in combat when he rescued an African American and pulled him back under enemy fire. Someone told me the fuller story that he may have pulled back a second person that day, and then himself was injured, and a non-combatant went in, and Pete was hauled out by the non-combatant on his back facing upward, shooting a gun at the enemy. A virtual tank, 2 people. How did he do this? Audacity, and the audacity that's needed in the kingdom. Audacity and the habit of having practiced that. He had gone through that drill and thought how he might pull someone out. Maybe he had someone else lie down somewhere and then pull them out. So audacity and habit, 2 great gifts that he gives us. We remember him now as a magna anima. And so we say, bless us, O Lord, in these thy gifts, which we are about to receive from thy bounty, through Christ our Lord. Amen.
So thank you, Father Bernie. Now we will invite you to share on some of the refreshments for lunch if you would like, or just to socialize. The building is open, so if you would like to go in, it's air conditioned, it has restrooms. If you want to give yourself a tour, the building is open, but we invite you to stay and socialize. And many, many thanks to the family for being here. We really, really miss Pete, as I'm sure you do. So thank you.